The wind howled through the high grasses of the western plains, carrying with it the dry scent of dust and wild sage. It was early morning, but the sun already threatened to burn through the horizon, scattering golden light over the sprawling landscape. The world seemed endless here, miles of rolling hills dotted with scraggly trees, and beyond, the distant silhouette of mountains, jagged like broken teeth. A small figure stumbled along the dirt trail that cut across the prairie, its feet bare, caked in dust. The child, no older than 12, moved with a limp, every step a struggle. Clothes hung loosely from their thin frame, patched in places with scraps of fabric too faded to match. Their eyes, a piercing shade of grey, scanned the horizon as if hoping someone, anyone, might appear. But the prairie held only the wind and the faint call of a hawk circling high above. This child, named Eli, had known hardship too young. The past few months had been a blur of sorrow. Both parents gone, his father to a fever that had claimed the town months ago, his mother to a sudden accident that left Eli alone with nothing but memories and a few tattered belongings. The small shack they had called home was now a hollow shell, its walls sagging and roof leaking, the floorboards creaking beneath the weight of silence. Eli had no choice but to move westward, following rumors of work on the sprawling ranches beyond the hills. He had heard of a man named Josiah Kane, a rancher known for his harsh but fair ways, who might offer work in exchange for shelter and meals. The thought of a roof over his head, a hot meal, was enough to push Eli forward, even as exhaustion tugged at his limbs. By noon, Eli stumbled into a shallow valley where the earth was parched and cracked. The sun bore down on him mercilessly, and he dropped to the ground, drawing shallow breaths. He pressed a small, calloused hand to his stomach, empty for hours, and let out a quiet, defeated sigh. Just as his vision blurred from fatigue, a sound reached his ears, the rhythmic clatter of hooves on dry dirt. Looking up, Eli saw a lone rider approaching, silhouetted against the sun. The man wore a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face, a long coat flapping in the breeze. His horse moved with practiced ease, a chestnut mare whose muscles rippled beneath the glossy coat. Eli tried to rise but faltered, sinking back onto the sun-baked dirt. The rider slowed as he drew near, squinting against the glare. When he dismounted, his boots thudded against the hard ground, sending up small puffs of dust. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a face weathered by years of sun and wind. His eyes, a deep shade of brown, softened slightly as they fell on the child. "You all right there, kid?" the man asked, his voice gravelly but not unkind. He knelt down beside Eli, extending a rough hand. Eli hesitated but took it, feeling the calluses against his palm, a hand hardened by work but not cruel. I'm fine," Eli croaked, though the words were weak and hollow. The man raised an eyebrow. "You look half dead to me. Name's Josiah Kane. You're a long way from anywhere." Eli swallowed, dusting the dirt from his sleeves. Eli Harper, I'm looking for work." Josiah studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Work, huh? Can't say I hire kids often, but guess I've got room in my barn. You can rest, eat, then we'll see what you're made of." Eli's heart leapt. Shelter, food, safety, words he hadn't heard in months. He nodded vigorously, swallowing back a lump in his throat. "Thank you, sir." Josiah lifted him gently, helping Eli onto the horse behind him. The ride to the Kane Ranch was long but quiet. Eli clung to Josiah, the wind whipping through their hair, and stared at the horizon. The plains stretched endlessly, and yet for the first time in months, Eli felt something he hadn't dared feel: hope. The ranch appeared as a cluster of buildings in the distance, a main house of sturdy timber, barns, corrals, and fields that promised work and life. Cattle grazed lazily under the sun, their lowing blending with the distant clatter of tools and boots. Josiah guided Eli off the horse and toward the main barn. "You can clean stalls first," Josiah said. "Then we'll see what else you can handle. Ain't gonna be easy, but work keeps a man and a boy alive." Eli nodded again, determination hardening in his chest. I can do it." The barn smelled of hay, animals and sweat, a strong, earthy scent that made Eli's stomach growl. He worked quickly, shoveling manure, feeding the horses, stacking hay bales. Josiah watched from a distance, occasionally calling out instructions. Eli's hands blistered and his back ached, but he didn't complain. Each task completed was another step toward survival. Another moment where he felt less like a ghost wandering the plains and more like a person again. That evening, Josiah brought him a plate of stew and bread. The food was simple, but it tasted like heaven. Eli ate hungrily, the warmth spreading through his body, making him feel almost human again. "You got grit, kid," Josiah said, settling beside him on the bench. "Most wouldn't have lasted a day out there." Eli looked at him, eyes shining. I don't have anywhere else to go." Josiah nodded, understanding in his gaze. "Well, you've got a place here. Work hard, and you'll be part of the ranch. You don't have to be alone anymore." For the first time in a long while, Eli allowed himself a small, hopeful smile. That night he lay in a small cot in the barn, listening to the low snorts of horses and the rustle of hay. The world was still harsh and unforgiving, but for the first time, he felt a thread of connection, someone who might care, someone who might teach him how to live again. Over the next few weeks, Eli became part of the rhythm of the ranch. He learned to ride, mend fences, and care for the animals. Josiah was strict but fair, teaching Eli the value of hard work and patience. Slowly, Eli's small frame grew stronger, his eyes brighter, and the despair that had once clouded his heart began to lift. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Eli stood on a small hill overlooking the ranch. The wind rustled through his hair, and he felt a quiet sense of belonging. Josiah joined him, handing him a canteen of water. "You've done good, kid," Josiah said. "You've come a long way in a short time. But there's still a lot to learn. Life out here ain't easy, and it sure ain't fair." Eli nodded, gripping the canteen. I want to learn, sir. I don't want to be alone anymore." Josiah looked at him, a flicker of emotion in his eyes that he rarely let show. "You won't be alone. Not while I'm around. Just remember, the plains will test you. It's gonna hurt sometimes. But if you hold on, you'll find strength you didn't know you had." Eli's heart swelled with gratitude. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to dream, not of running, not of hiding, but of staying, of building a life, however hard, in a place that finally felt like home. The night fell and the stars emerged, scattered like diamonds across the dark velvet sky. Eli lay in the hay, listening to the distant calls of owls and the gentle breathing of horses. Somewhere deep in the vast, unforgiving plains, he had found a glimmer of hope, and for the first time he believed he could survive. Little did Eli know, the real test of the plains and of his heart was still to come. Storms, both literal and figurative, were brewing on the horizon, and the bond between a lonely child and a grizzled rancher would be tested in ways neither could imagine. But tonight, for the first time, Eli Harper felt the warmth of a home. The prairie was a place of extremes. One day the sun beat down mercilessly, turning the dirt to dust that cracked beneath the feet. The next, storms would roll in with thunder booming across the plains, sending torrents of rain that turned the trails into rivers of mud. Eli Harper learned this quickly, as the weeks at Cane Ranch brought lessons harsher than any hunger or loneliness he had faced before. Eli had grown stronger, leaner, more capable. He could ride a horse as well as some of the older ranch hands, mend fences with Josiah's guidance, and even calm the more stubborn cattle when they got spooked. Yet despite these accomplishments, the prairie had a way of humbling even the toughest of souls. It began one afternoon when Josiah sent Eli to check on a distant herd. The wind had been picking up since morning, carrying the scent of rain. Eli rode his horse, a small but spirited mare named Daisy, across the undulating hills. The horizon darkened, clouds swelling like storm clouds in a painting. Eli had just reached the herd when the first crack of thunder split the sky. The cattle scattered in panic, and Eli struggled to guide them back. Rain poured down in heavy sheets, soaking him to the bone. He called out, urging the animals forward, his voice barely audible above the roaring wind. Hours passed like this, and Eli's hands were raw from gripping the reins. Fatigue clawed at him, and for the first time fear gripped his heart. He realized that the prairie was not just a place of work and survival. It was a force of nature that could crush the unprepared. As darkness fell, Eli saw a flash of lightning hit a tree near the herd. The tree splintered, crashing to the ground, narrowly missing one of the frightened cows. Daisy shied violently, throwing Eli to the muddy earth. Pain shot through his leg as he landed awkwardly. He struggled to rise, rain soaking his clothes and chilling him to the bone. Just as despair began to take hold, a figure emerged through the storm, Josiah, his coat soaked, his hat pulled low over his brow. He moved with the certainty of a man who had battled the prairie all his life, shouting orders to Eli and guiding the cattle back into a tighter group. Together, drenched and exhausted, they finally drove the herd back to the relative safety of the corral. Josiah knelt beside Eli, examining his leg. "You all right, kid?" he asked, concern breaking through his usual stoicism. Eli grimaced, shaking his head. It hurts, sir. But I think I'm okay." Josiah helped him to his feet, supporting him as they made their way to the barn. The fire inside was already crackling, and the warmth felt like salvation. Eli stripped off his soaked clothes and sat close to the fire, shivering, while Josiah handed him a dry blanket and a cup of hot tea. "You did good out there," Josiah said quietly, almost to himself. "Most kids would have given up. But you held on." Eli stared into the flames, feeling the ache in his leg and the relief in his chest. I don't want to fail, sir. Not here, not with you." Josiah's eyes softened. "You won't fail, Eli, not if you keep that grit." Days passed and Eli's leg healed, but the storm left a mark, not just on the prairie, but on him. He began to understand that life on the ranch demanded more than strength or skill. It required courage, resilience, and a willingness to face fear head-on. Josiah became more than a mentor. He was a guardian, a steady presence in a world that had previously offered Eli nothing but loss. But the prairie had more lessons in store. One morning, a rider approached the ranch on a borrowed horse, carrying urgent news. A neighboring ranch had suffered a fire, and some of their cattle had wandered off, now mingling with the cane herd. Josiah frowned, scanning the horizon. "We need to round them up," he said, "and quickly. Cattle mixing is bad for business and dangerous." Eli's heart raced. He had never dealt with a herd this large, let alone in a crisis. But Josiah's hand on his shoulder steadied him. "I can do it, sir," Eli said, determination in his voice. The ride to find the strays was grueling. The sun beat down relentlessly, sweat soaking Eli's shirt and burning his eyes. Cattle stampeded across the hills, some darting into ravines or along cliffs. Eli called to them, mimicking the tones Josiah had taught him, guiding them with patience and precision. Hours turned into a full day, and by late afternoon, Eli and Josiah had managed to corral most of the wandering cattle. Eli's hands were blistered, his muscles screaming in protest, but he felt a surge of pride. He had faced fear, exhaustion, and uncertainty, and he had not faltered. Josiah clapped him on the back. "You're becoming a real rancher, Eli, not just a boy. You've got the heart for it." Eli smiled, though his exhaustion was visible. I want to be better, sir. I want to make you proud." Josiah looked at him, a flicker of emotion in his eyes. "You already have. You don't know it yet, but you've got a strength in you that most folks never find. Just don't forget it." That night, Eli lay in the barn thinking about his parents. He missed them fiercely, the ache in his chest never fully disappearing. But now he had someone who cared for him, someone who believed in him. Josiah had become a surrogate father, filling the void left by tragedy, and Eli felt a warmth he had almost forgotten existed. Weeks turned into months. Eli's bond with Josiah grew stronger with each passing day. They shared stories by the fire, taught each other lessons, and endured the harsh realities of prairie life together. Eli learned not just to survive, but to thrive, to find purpose in hard work, courage in the face of fear, and family in unexpected places. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of purple and gold, Josiah and Eli sat atop a hill overlooking the ranch. The wind rustled the grasses, carrying the scent of sage and earth. Eli leaned against Josiah, feeling the solidity of the man's presence. "Sir," Eli said softly, Do you think I could ever be as strong as you?" Josiah chuckled, a deep, warm sound. "Kid, you're already stronger than you think. Strength ain't just about muscles or skill. It's about heart, and you've got a heart that can weather any storm." Eli felt tears prick at his eyes. "Thank you. For everything. I don't know what I'd do without you." Josiah placed a hand on his shoulder. "And you never will have to find out, Eli. Not while I'm here." The prairie stretched endlessly before them, vast and untamed, but for the first time, Eli didn't feel small or lost. He felt seen, valued, and part of something larger than himself. The hardships would come, storms would rage, and the world would test him. But with Josiah by his side, Eli Harper knew he could endure anything.